controversial Tottenham Hotspur sponsorship deal should be completely scrapped. That's the advice from Tourism Minister Patricia de Lille to the SA Tourism Board. She says the deal is not in the best interests of South Africans and has not been budgeted for. The nearly R1 billion proposed deal would have seen Spurs promote South Africa as a tourist destination, but instead it caused widespread outrage earlier this year. My colleague, fellow anchor and reporter here at eNCA, Heidi Jokos, has been on this story, joining me now in the studio to discuss this more. Good afternoon, Heidi. Thanks for coming in. So the minister declaring that basically, according to her, she has advised that this deal is invalid and unlawful.
Yes, certainly. I think it's also important to highlight that the minister has been in this position for, about 2-3 weeks, and she's, of course, had to familiarize herself with the details of this particular deal. But there was a lot of outrage that came from this after SA Tourism and that presentation that was brought to the public's attention, that this deal with Tottenham Hotspur would cost about R1 billion. It would be paid over a 3-year period, and it would supposedly boost South African tourism. That was, of course, further investigated, with 2 board members actually being suspended because of this particular deal. Now the minister coming out and saying she had to seek legal advice to further understand what was actually wrong with this deal, why the outrage, why the frustration. And the minister highlighting the fact that there are 3 main reasons. The first one is that there was no prior approval to this deal from the minister, which is now the minister, Patricia de Lille. Secondly, it contravenes parts of the PFMA Act, parts of our constitution, because it's got to do with a service that's being rendered when actually there is no service that's being rendered. It's almost like a tender was put out, but they're trying to understand what the service is going to ultimately be. And thirdly, they have an issue with the amount that was going to be paid. The minister highlighting that there's so much more that they could actually be spending this money on, and they don't see almost the return on investment.
You should have followed a kind of a procurement process,
yes,
like a tender, so to speak.
Yes, and that's not what has happened. The evidence before the minister doesn't show any of that, and also the return on investment. How is this ultimately going to help South African tourism? So according to the legal advice, this deal is unlawful and invalid, and it should not go ahead. Let's listen to the minister on that.
This matter has been marred by a lot of controversy and has raised many questions. And we need to resolve this matter decisively and in the best interest of the people of South Africa as soon as possible. As a country, when we enter into such massive partnerships, it is vital that we are able to fully be accountable, that we are transparent and can answer South Africans clearly and honestly. So based on the board chairperson's interim response that I received this morning, my advice to the South African Tourism Board is that this proposal may as well be stopped completely.
Stop completely. You know, Tottenham Hotspur is in hot water at the moment in the world of football.
They have a red flag.
Their coach is even angry at them. Anyway, that's not the story.
Yeah.
Now, is there a time frame to this, what the minister is advising and recommending is the way forward now, which is stop the deal?
Yes, so I think what's important here is that the minister has basically said this deal's not going to go ahead. The minister has said it basically stops by me, and this deal will not go ahead.
So the board can't change the minister's advice.
So this is where it gets a bit tricky. I asked the minister, I said to the minister, but what if the board decides to go ahead with the deal despite your advice and despite you getting legal advice saying that this is invalid and unlawful? The minister says that this will only happen if they take the matter to courts, and they then apply for an interdict to say this is why they want the matter to go ahead. The minister says by the 29th of March, the deal needs to be completely put off. So whatever discussions are being had currently now with Tottenham Hotspur, that needs to end and be concluded by the 29th of March. The Minister also highlighting the fact that the board will, of course, have to go back and discuss, especially when it comes to the suspension and what happens to these board members and if any heads are going to roll because of this particular deal. Because somebody somewhere decided to go ahead with this proposal without really having a proper and thorough discussion with the Minister. We also tried to get a response from the from SA Tourism CEO, and he said that they have to go back and review this document from the Minister, and they are unable to speak at this stage. Let's listen to what the Minister has to say about those timeframes.
In my initial letter to them, I've given them until the letter I wrote to them on the 22nd of March. I gave them until the 29th of March to respond. So after the 29th of March, I will then finally close this matter once and for all. But for now, this morning I received an interim response from the board. And then the complete final response will come on the 29th.